Hi everyone, and welcome to the predictions based on astrology for the week of January 27, 2020. First, let's quickly recap predictions that I made for the previous week. To cover the stock market direction, that is Dow Jones and NASDAQ, I actually made correct predictions for the 4 trading days of the previous week, as well as for the following Monday. I'm actually recording this on Monday the 27th, having had already posted my written predictions on my blog at tolstunka.com. So let's see, other predictions that I made were some of the ongoing predictions that I have that have to do with the slow unfolding aspect, Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn, that has been out there for a while and will continue to be with us pretty much throughout this entire year, slowly, I guess, separating, but it is fairly tight in January of 2020. And so we had seen an intensification of events associated with this particular transit. So things like reshuffling of the government, as we saw in Russian government. And this actually had been reported the week prior, but the new government, I guess, was recently, I'm not sure if they reelected it or they appointed new people, as well as unfortunately, some increased news about either famous, powerful leaders dying or just famous people. People have been sort of in the know or held some powerful positions. So obviously, just recently we had the news about the death of the NBA star Kobe Bryant, but there are also some other deaths of like famous athletes. There was a Dutch, I guess, motorcyclist, and there was also a Monty Python star. Of course, that person died at 77, which was expected, but people who are well known and either are old or somehow had been in power for a long time had been stepping away. And again, in Russia, of course, we had some major, I guess, political players stepping away, in part associated with this reshuffling. And also, I specifically pointed out that already many times, even including in my 2019 predictions, that January of 2020 will see an intensification of various disasters, major earthquakes, and potentially some, problems related to healthcare, because a similar aspect between Saturn and Pluto, that is conjunction, previously had occurred right when there was a AIDS epidemic in the 80s. And so indeed we had seen this last week a major earthquake, 6.8 in Turkey, that had led to many deaths and of course loss of life, but also injuries, etc., other problems. And we had seen the increased news, rapidly intensifying kind of problematic situation out of China with the virus, and that also coincided with me making predictions for China specifically, that there may be increased news, again, various disasters and problems there, but also focus on things like Neptunian topics related to like navy oil, chemicals, pollution, and infectious diseases. And that is the area of China's horoscope that actually will continue experiencing strong sort of transformative transit through the entire year. It started back in actually 2018 and will continue through 2020, and more on that later when I get to the predictions. So let's see, other kind of news that I thought that might be related to oil, and I made this prediction actually in the predictions back, the installment for the week of January 13th, and I had repeated them last week as well, is that I was expecting several days, like late last week and into early this week, so January 25th or 28th, to be important dates with stronger focus than usual on like oil, again, chemicals, pollution, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and that there may be swings in the stock market, potentially a strong down day on Monday, the 27th, which had indeed come through. Both NASDAQ and Dow Jones had dropped over 0.5%. I also was expecting that there would be a strong sort of price swing for oil, and I actually thought that oil might go up. It did instead drop. However, yes, it does indeed. It was a, I guess, major sort of a news, I guess, because of the coronavirus. They're expecting lower demand on oil, and the oil itself did have, I guess, it was the fifth consecutive drop, and it has been now dropping for, I guess, longer than had previously. Oil price has been dropping now for longer than, I'm trying to see what the exact, I guess the lowest finish in over 3 months due to, you know, these coronavirus fears. And all of these topics are related. Again, there's a strong Neptunian influence this particular weekend and into Monday, Tuesday. And Neptune has to do with both oil and epidemics, diseases, etc. And at the same time as predicted, I thought that the prices for various products and services associated with, again, healthcare, pharmaceuticals may go up. And indeed, I see there's a headline that the vaccine and diagnostic stocks actually rose on Monday, the 27th, again, on the news of spreading coronavirus. There was also news on the 27th that the New York and federal authorities had sued Martin Shkreli for, you know, they were seeking lifetime ban from the pharma industry. Let's see. And again, on Monday, there was news about a major fire at Alabama Marina that had basically, the blaze had, you know, they killed, I think, 8 people, 7 injured, and 35 vessels, primarily houseboats, had burned down. So that's sort of definitely a manifestation of the aspect we're experiencing, again, through, I'd say, Monday, Tuesday, where we have a difficult, tense aspect between Mars, which is fire, accidents, explosions, and Neptune, which has to do with anything to do with like marine life, water, navy, as well as oil, gas, anything to do with confusion, secrets, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and even the Kobe Bryant's death. Again, we have somebody who's an athlete, and Mars rules, of course, accidents, explosions, fires, but also sports. And apparently the helicopter crash occurred because, or at least preliminary reports say that it may have been due to the heavy fog, and fog, of course, has to do with Neptune, because it just makes things kind of hard to see and unclear, and, you know, leads to confusion. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody would affect it by that exact aspect, but it would be, I guess, affecting many people maybe directly and some people indirectly by just being aware of news related to these topics. Let's see, and as I said, the stocks had dropped. Let's see if there's anything else noteworthy. And I thought there was also, I had a prediction about communication and transportation industries in the US having some sort of negative news. I honestly did not see any headlines related to that. Again, I maybe just missed something. I'm only really picking up on things that are truly major and just really pop up there, because obviously if you dig, you know, somewhere, you know, somebody probably is experiencing, you know, some sort of difficulty with communication and transportation. So I'm only really looking for major announcements here. So for this week, the week of January 27th, I do think that, again, this week may, again, see some major earthquakes or continuing in news about disasters, not necessarily just related to this coronavirus spreading. But again, the times are sort of tense, especially in the beginning of the week. And there may be ongoing tensions related to geopolitical tensions, governments, kind of leaders changing, changes at the top leadership, maybe of some established government corporations, etc. At the same time, I think there may also be increased news for US. That's through about February 2nd, where there may be increased tensions in international negotiations, or, as I said, potentially still we may hear about problems with communication and transportation industries, and they may have to do with just some delays. Maybe it's due to weather or due to some strikes or some negotiation issues, or, you know, even with this coronavirus epidemic kind of spreading, there may be some problems with like stalled production, inability to get some parts, or basically something that it's not really things are stalled forever, but they're proceeding with kind of a lot of difficulties because something is missing. Like I said, a part, workers are not there, and it may also lead to some escalations in international negotiations, which the following period for US, specifically February 1st through about the 12th, and particularly February 3 through 5, and then the 7th and the 9th, may see particular sort of intensification of additional problems where there'll be additional tensions with partners where maybe previously things were kind of proceeding slowly, and so maybe in negotiations parties will become kind of restless or less patient, and so there may be kind of either increased aggression or sense of urgency or sort of more pressure to just get things done, and or there may be increased news about like military activities, accidents, fires, explosions, and again those may involve oil, navy, chemicals, poisons. So it could be again something like this marina fire, so it may be attack on a ship, so explosion on a ship, or fire on a ship, burning maybe of like an oil rig or some refinery, or chemical plant exploding. Which reminds me, I forgot that last week we also had this blast in Houston. There was a big blast, so something along the lines of, again, something to do with, and again that's specifically for US, like an explosion or fire, but it also involves either marina, chemicals, oil, gas, like a gas leak, place that is surrounded by water, or place that has to do with like religion, music, movies, things like that. All of those are Neptunian kind of sort of manifestations. And indeed, with the number of coronavirus cases increasing in the US, of course, there are only a few here for now, but specifically on February 3rd through the 5th, I expect that there may be increased news about either this particular situation with coronavirus and or just healthcare and pharmaceuticals, as well as, of course, oil, gas, and chemicals, etc. And the news may most likely will be negative, stressful, or involving, like I said, fires, accidents, fever, or something to do with like need for urgent action because of some problems that need to be urgently addressed. And however, at the same time, even if there's an aggressive approach taken to perhaps taking care of whatever the situation may be, at this point, because of the tense aspects, the action may be misdirected, so it may come sort of not the right time, not the right place, or maybe it could be just not addressing the cause issue, the root, cause rather, and the root cause actually may have to do with something that is very elusive, secretive, or just simply, like I said, like that fog, it's confusing, it's hard to see what the issue is. It may have to do either with chemicals, drugs, or some biomedical type activities, or even have to do with like seafood, fish. Perhaps there is some case, outbreak of seafood poisoning or something like that. It needs to be recalled. But it may be hard to determine like where exactly the issue is, what's the culprit, and or the actions just somehow are not really able to address it. Again, they come too late, they're misdirected, or they're too fast, and so they miss things somehow. And unfortunately, at this time, because I guess these Neptunian qualities, the sort of, if say there is a spread of a problem of whatever that may be, it will be harder to stop it because it's just things are just too obscured, and like water, it kind of seeps through, and it's hard to stop it because it just is able to penetrate through various mediums, and so I guess whatever the situation may be in the early to mid February in the US, be it coronavirus outbreak or some chemical poisoning somewhere, at this time it may not be. It will be hard to address it adequately, I would say. So for China, also for the entire week, especially January 29th, could be a significant week where, again, there may be increased focus and news regarding secretive or literally underground activities such as perhaps mining, or maybe if there's an underground recycling facility, or if there is like some sort of a leaching into the ground underground, or maybe, again, like I said, it's a secretive activity that even could be happening underground. So some Some focus on that, or maybe something is excavated or something is buried, like literally into the soil. Maybe there will be increased news about even recycling, nuclear power plants, as well as topics like insurance, taxes, tariffs, stock market, and death. All of those have already, of course, to do with like the 8th house, for those who are more familiar with astrology. So that will be emphasized this week, especially on the 29th of January, as I said. And we may also expect greater than usual market swings and news about communication and or transportation disruption. So that may have to do with maybe there's an ongoing agreement or negotiation and maybe disrupted or postponed, or there may be some increased kind of activities in the area, perhaps increased tariffs or greater than expected death toll, increased pollution. So something may be greater than expected. So if, say, there was a plan to perhaps negotiate some tariff or some taxes or something along the lines of, maybe rates on loans or something like that, things may go kind of overboard and the impact or the decision may be greater, or the news may involve numbers that are greater than expected or has greater scope than expected. There may also be some additional regulations that would implemented that would involve long distance travel, shipments, international relations agreements, and or immigration. This could be within China. Of course, we have all this news about quarantine, but also international, like shipments or immigration. There may be some news about regulations affecting those. However, again, at this time, these regulations may not be as effective or may be seen as addressing the wrong issue. So maybe regulation is impeding travel or is, making it hard to ship something, but at the same time, it may be too broad or sort of misdirected, and either, the group of, say, products or people who are, who this regulation was aimed to perhaps prevent them from traveling or regulate, the shipments, is actually not going to be either the right group, or it's not going to be at the right time, or the ban maybe is not clearly specifying which, sort of category, under what conditions should be stopped or regulated. And so it's not going to be, if such regulations are implemented, they may not be as effective at this particular time. Let's see, so also another important period similar to, I guess, for the US is January 30th through February 10th. Again, especially February 3 through 5. So 3 through 5 of February will be important for both US and China. So for China, this period through, like I said, about the 10th of February may see increased focus. I think I'm repeating myself. This will be an increased focus on these secretive activities and potentially, like I said, regulations on travel. Let's see what else. As well as there might be increased focus on healthcare and either on the healthcare facilities or on secrecy that involves in handling something to do with either poisons, pollutions, and of course this epidemic, but also in generally drugs, oil, gas, navy, water, beverages, seafood, religion, prison. So more than just, the virus, more than just oil, any of these areas may be affected, and we may hear about, again, expansion of effort in those areas. So perhaps, more drugs, or they're building some healthcare facilities to address the epidemic, but there may also be increased, discoveries related to, say, oil or expansion in Navy. And again, at this time, it may be, or even excessively wet weather, but at this time, the news may be somewhat sort of disruptive or kind of at odds with what the effort is trying to address. So perhaps the expansion occurs in the wrong place, so it's not as successful, or at the wrong time, or it's the expansion. Somebody's trying to expand maybe a shipment or ship more products, perhaps more healthcare supplies, but for some reason it may be wet weather or some other just kind of a poorly thought plans cause that shipment to not really reach the location or locations on time, or there's some other basically miscommunications or disruptions where this communication transportation of specifically areas that have to do with for pharmaceuticals, oil, gas, beverages, chemicals may not really go as well as planned. And then specifically on the coronavirus outbreak in China, what I see in the chart of China is that this issue may potentially remain in focus through the end of this year, at least through the end of November, and that there may be escalations or some sort of peaks, either peaks of, say, death toll or peaks where something is discovered, and an important announcement is made that's related to some scientific discovery. And there will be three such periods, and out of those, the final period will be the most important, and those periods will be around March, July, and then end of October through November. So particularly like March 17th through 22nd, July 11 and 12, and then October 26th through November 20th, but especially November 9th through 13th. And out of all of those, like I said, most likely November, especially like early to mid-November, will be the most kind of important time. And what may happen will be either some sort of escalation, maybe, like I said, the death toll rises or things worsen, but shortly after that, they may be followed by positive news of either some solution being found or some relief achieved or some basically things kind of quietening down a little bit. However, the most intense period will likely be actually still ahead of us, August through November of 2020, and only, starting maybe December of 2020, things may actually kind of finally take turn for the, for good up and stay that way. That said, I added to my sort of a glance ahead section that I looked kind of fast forward, and in 2025 through early 2026, we may expect another sort of a large, I would say, either epidemic or pandemic or some sort of issue that has to do with, again, either viruses or influenza or chemical poisoning or bioweapons being released or water pollution, something along those lines. Of course, oil will likely be in the news. There may be another large either peak or drop in oil prices at the exact same time. And previously, because what we'll have conjunction between Saturn, which usually suppresses things, but also can create, artificial sort of embargo, which then prices may go up for oil, for example. With the conjunction with Neptune, which has to do again with oil, but also anything to do with like biomedical research, chemicals, gas, whatever. And last time when we had this conjunction was in 1918, which of course we had Spanish flu at the time that had killed back then 20 to 50 million people estimated, with population of Earth being about 500 million, so fairly large percentage, I guess, of population. So we may potentially have a more even grave situation occurring at that time. Of course, other potential events, which is still a few years away, but something to keep in mind. They may be just some problems for, say, sports, but sports that have to do with, that I say, doping. Maybe there will be some big scandal because again we have because also we'll have Neptune going into areas which have to do with sports and or military, some either doping or military personnel being injured due to bioweapons or chemicals, or maybe really bad weather that has to do with just basically fires, lack of water or lack of clean water, severe drought, and of course same thing. If there is perhaps an epidemic, it may be influenza, or it may be some other kind of disease. It may be like cholera or dysentery, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, that has to do with basically a lot of inflammation of the parts of the body that have to do with water or dehydration. Obviously in the cholera associated with a lot of diarrhea, etc., so leads to dehydration. So something to do with like a body experiencing fever and affects liquids in the body. So, blood, of course, or any other really liquids, and the person may be losing them, and because, again, the body is hot and either becomes dehydrated or severely inflamed. So that's 2025 to 2026. Cheerful prognosis there, but also there could be amazing scientific discoveries, Saturn has to do also with science and building, say, new dam or new submarine, something that's in the ocean that's just an amazing long-term construction project, like some sort of a bridge that's just, it's crazy amazing and had never seen before, some sort of a state of the art, or, some crazy submarine that has just amazing new scientific properties. But getting back to the week of January 27th, I think, again, I've already predicted and had come true that the Monday will be a major drop. Then I think on Tuesday, it will probably still be a drop. However, by the afternoon, market may turn back up. And if not on Tuesday afternoon, then by Wednesday, I think the market may go up. Thursday, I think market may also go up, although I only give it about 55% chance, so just very slight up potential there. And again, then on Friday, I think market may go back down. As far as some focus of these events, as I previously predicted already last several weeks, there may be increased focus on oil, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, poisons, places of worship, movies, music, beverages, etc. And there may be increased probability, especially early in the week, of various attacks, fires, explosions. They could be religious motivated, or just due to like fog, or just fire, some natural event. May have to do with like oil refinery being attacked, or even oil prices perhaps trigger some protests. It's worth mentioning that in the upcoming month, we may see sort of a repeat of these events, although perhaps things may happen to sort of even stronger or greater degree. So around June 8th through 15th, there will be about a week period where these similar issues that took place between like 25th of January and 28th of January may repeat again, but like on even, I guess, more increased scale. So any of these news about coronavirus epidemic, explosion or fires that have to do with like ships, marine sort of objects that are on the water, volcanoes that are surrounded by water, or some sort of other outbreaks of some other diseases, like again, cholera, dysentery, something that involves like fever, diarrhea, maybe in the news, something that's spread via water contamination, and additional announcements about healthcare, pharmaceuticals, as well as fishing, fish, seafood, poisons, mental health facilities or just health facilities, even prisons and monasteries. And we may also see strong market moves, particularly June 9 through the 12th, may be kind of important dates. And I think there may be a drop in the stock market at that time, as well as increased news, of course, about oil, gas, pharmaceuticals, and chemicals. And so prices of related products and stocks may also be experiencing some strong moves at that time. So let's see, then also for the US, January 30th through 31st, may see it again increased focus on oil, gas, navy, water, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, drugs, as well as lies, epidemics, confusion, poisons, beverages, etc. And value of the related businesses, again, this is just for the US, may decline, and or these areas may report either expenses or insufficient profits. And the reason for these negative news may perhaps be related again to problems with transportation or communication. So maybe if there was agreement, it wasn't reached, or a transport was on the way with some healthcare supplies and it didn't really make it. Something went wrong, or it was determined that something is not being transported or buying. Maybe a company decided to kind of not buy another company or acquire another company, or sales are down, or say if a financial agreement was reached regarding, say, a sale or purchase of, acquisition, or some sort of a deal that again involves healthcare, oil, gas, etc. But it was decided that the financial details of this agreement are not clear enough, and so this leads to kind of uncertainty about the value of, again, either those businesses or related products, and so their value may go down. So that's it for the week. One more quick glance is I expect that the situation from January that has to do with like earthquake, government reshuffling, and some tensions in general may actually intensify sometime from the end of February into early April, and particularly I would be looking for March 22nd through 31st to see even stronger kind of events that have to do with, again, large earthquakes, intense activities between intense negotiations among various countries, say US, Iran, or something like that, or just increased in like various disasters, military activities, accidents, and that's kind of a global prognosis. So definitely, I would say will be an important year ahead of us, and hopefully these dates that I just mentioned, which you can also find in the written form at pilstunka.com, so you don't have to sit there with pen and paper, hopefully, and writing all of that down. And hopefully these will be helpful to you determine when you want to travel someplace or when to hold, important parties or announcements. And I would avoid these kind of tense days for any sort of beginnings. Maybe you want to incorporate your company or, start a business or make a major announcement. So perhaps kind of it's best to not do that on the most tense days. And if you see there's a strong earthquake somewhere or, really kind of a intense, difficult, stressful news, chances are they're happening under a very intense negative aspect. So you may want to postpone certain, important activities if possible. So that's about it for me. And I hope you otherwise have a fun, enjoyable week and stay safe out there. And I'll catch you guys later. See you all.